Okay, brilliant. I think we are in. Just make sure this is all set up nice. Can I make this screen bigger? Okay. What does that do? Right. Okay. Good. Right. I'll make a start. If you're here or if you come along and you have any questions, just put them in the comment box below and I will respond to them as they come in and hopefully help you out with anything that you need. So before I start then properly, hello everyone, my name is Rob and welcome to the Tumble Hub and this is July's Tumble Tune-Up. The way this works is a couple of days before the tune-up happens, I'll put out a message and say, hey, what are your tumble headaches? What can I do to help? And people respond, they send in what they're struggling with, and then I do my best to offer solutions to those problems. And the same goes for you. If you're here, feel free to drop a message and I will do my best to help you out with those tumble headaches. The general setup is that we try and do this for about 10 to 15 minutes so that you're not on here for ages, but also just to provide some practical solutions to your tumble issues. All right. While you're here, if you like what you're seeing and you find it useful or you think somebody else would find it useful, please share it, but also please like and subscribe to the page because it does help it grow. So thank you for that. And thank you to everyone who has followed so far. I'm just going to jump straight into it. I have got a few things that I'm going to be talking about today. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the back handspring. And actually, the back handspring came up quite a few times this month. So I've got 3 questions that all center around the back handspring, but I think they're all kind of linked as well. So I'll do my best, see what I've got, and then we'll take it from there. So one of the questions I got was, my daughter can't hit her back handspring. Now, that's a little vague. So how do we unpack that and what does that mean? If your daughter can't hit that back handspring, I'm assuming that means that they are performing one. It's just not very, it's not something that a coach might put into a routine, or it might be slightly dangerous, or it might not be technically correct. And the main thing here is that if the athlete is throwing it, or if your athlete is performing a back handspring and they can't quite hit it, the chances are that it's not a confidence issue, which is great. But it does mean that it's a technical issue, and that's something that's going to need to be addressed. Otherwise, the athlete is not going to be able to progress into a sequence of back handsprings and then gradually work their way up the levels to tucks and things like that. So the main thing I would say, if your athlete is struggling to nail a back handspring, I would definitely start by looking at the approach. All right. So how is the athlete starting this back handspring that is making it difficult for them to complete the skills successfully? So the main thing I would say here is make sure that they hit a strong athletic position, or something that we would generally call a set position. And that means that the athlete will bend at their knees, but they're pushing their hips towards the direction of travel. We never want the knees to drop over the toes. If the knees are dropping over the toes, we end up with a buckled back handspring, and it kind of had this circular undercutting thing that happens. So we want to make sure that the athlete sets, and as they set, they push their hips the direction of travel. So as they jump, they can go long into the back handspring. When they drop their knees, they end up going up and down, and it's very messy and very difficult to perform well. So make sure that the athlete sets their back handspring, they push their hips the direction of travel, and they swing their arms back. The next part after that is that one of the common mistakes that I see is when athletes jump into their back handspring, they throw their head. And what that means is that the athlete is doing 2 things that is going to really, or there are 2 things that are going to be a consequence of that that's going to affect the skill. First thing is, if they're throwing their head, their arms are in the incorrect position. Their arms should be by the ears before, this is how fast the arm should be. The arm should be by the ears before the athlete has even finished leaving the floor. All right. So the arms must be super fast from that set position to the ears. But then also when they do the back handspring, or when they're leaving the floor, they need to be able to stand up to their fullest height and lengthen their body as much as they can. If the body isn't long, then we're in a weak position because we're not squeezed and engaged. When we stand up and to our full height and we're engaging our core and our glutes and our hamstrings and all of those things, it means that the athlete is in a better position to create power for the skill that, the power that is needed for the skill. And then the second and third thing I would say about if your athlete is unable to successfully complete their back handspring is handstand and handstand hops are absolutely your friends. If your athlete is struggling to perform a handstand or a handstand hop, because the block might be an issue as well, then I would stop them doing back handsprings altogether for the time being and take it back to just handstands and handstand hops, because handstand along with round-offs are fundamentally probably the most important skills your athlete is ever going to learn. So if the handstand or the handstand hops are not right, stop the back handspring altogether and get them over into doing their into doing those basic principle skills. And then that kind of takes me back to the final point, really, is to make sure that your athlete understands the key shapes necessary for a back handspring. So we've already talked about the athletic position. Then we're going to talk about making sure they know how to perform an arch where they need to squeeze in their body, a handstand shape, and then the hollow as they leave the back handspring. So we've got an athletic position, arch, handstand, hollow, right? And then that way, if the athlete has a full understanding of those skills, when the coach turns around and says, there's something wrong with your approach or your athletic position, we need to work on that, the athlete understands what that then means. So just a greater education around those shapes and make sure that the athlete is really familiar with those. So that's what I would say if your daughter or your athlete is struggling to hit their back handsprings. This question I thought was really good. So moving on to question number 2 about back handsprings. I got a question about dancers with super flexible backs. What do you do with athletes or dancers who are super flexible in their backs? So this kind of reminds me of a conversation I had a few years ago. The lower back is not meant to be flexible, right? The lower back is designed for stability. All right. So these are our lumbar vertebrae that I'm talking about here, right at the bottom of the spine. They are designed to keep the body stable. They are not designed for huge ranges of movement. All right. So I would be aware of that off the bat. If your athlete is super flexible in the lower back, we need to do work with that. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. However, they are designed for range in the thoracic part of the vertebrae, which is the top of the spine, just below. I can't remember what the neck vertebrae are called, but just below the neck vertebrae, you have the thoracic vertebrae, and that's where all your movement is in the top half of your body. They are designed for range. So those coupled with shoulder range, I would be working on the flexibility in our shoulders so much more than I would be doing anything with the lower back. So focus on arm extension. When they make the arch shape, the arch is created here rather than just, sort of working down the hips and trying to create the arch that way. Try and create the arch with the top part as well and the shoulders. And then the other thing is condition the lower back and the glutes, the hamstrings, the quads. All of that area there is designed to help really make the body squeeze up nice and tight when it hits that arch shape, right? And that will give you a better shape for the back handsprings, the arch shape I'm talking about. But it should also protect the lower back of the athletes a little bit more, especially if they're complaining of pain and things like that. And then the final question I got for back hamstrings was how I'm really struggling with connecting my back handspring series. So there's a couple of things here. Record your back handspring, review the footage. Where are the issues? All right, because they're likely that there are issues there. It might be that they're not powerful enough. It might be that they're not fast enough. It might be that your angles are off. It could be any of those things. But then when it comes down to the backhand, the series itself, you're looking at power and feet placement. Are your feet in the right place? Are you creating enough power and speed for a back handspring series? So, for example, if I'm looking to create speed and power in my back handspring, the first thing I'm going to get an athlete to do is back handspring upper wedge. Right? If an athlete can back handspring upper wedge, then I know they're creating reasonable amounts of power and a reasonable amount of speed, and that's where you can really troubleshoot the arm placement as well. But then the upgrade for that, if I'm looking at my level 3 girls, I'm thinking, or athletes, how can I really push them now? I'll get them to go back handsprings upper wedge. So one back handspring on the floor, and then the second back handspring in a series would be to go up the wedge. And if they're not ready for that, it would just be a single back handspring upper wedge. But that's really difficult. And so the athlete has to work extra hard to be able to perform those skills. But then also it will make the connection easier because they've been able to work on creating so much more power and speed. And then the second one is feet placement. If your athlete is landing with their feet in a way where they would traditionally finish a skill, which is kind of feet underneath in that kind of cushioned landing position, if you like, then you're going to create problems. So anything where an athlete has to go back handspring sweep through to dish would be quite nice. So a back handspring block, pull their hands and hips together so that the athlete can sweep through and land on their back. Obviously, this would need to be done on crash mats. But anything like that will really help the athlete think about to driving the toes in front of the belly so that their angle is going to be more like this as they land. So they can then push off into the next skill. Whereas if they're kind of landing like straight like this, there's not going to be any momentum to then go into the next part. Okay. I've got a question about setting. And basically the question was specifically about when they're tired. So an athlete is saying, after I'm tired, I've got to set for my skills and I don't have enough energy to do that. Okay. First of all, let's talk about the angle issue and your set. When you are doing a round off back handspring, back tuck, layout, or fall, for example, the back handspring has to finish in a specific angle that is different to level 1 and 2. When you finish your round off back handspring, if you were going to do another back handspring, you traditionally have the feet in front so you can go long into the next skill. But when you want to do a tuck, because the projection needs to go straight up, you finish the angle in the opposite way. So now we have the feet here and the top of the body here. So we've come out of our back handspring here to then rebound high into the next skill, which would be a tuck, layout, or fall. This way, the athlete can have the arms up by the ears, but then they can set using the hips, because for a lot of our athletes, mostly they're female, the point of rotation is going to be in the hips. So we need to make sure that we punch the feet out long so that we can set up upright into a tuck, layout, or fall. And if you're worried about fatigue for this, I would be advising you to do practice runs. So at my gym, AEC, one of the things that we do, we have athletes group up and they do sprints. So they have to sprint. They have to so they'll sprint the width of the mat, and then they'll sprint the width back, and then generally they'll clean and they'll go into like a back handspring series, or they'll do a round of back handspring, whatever it is. But that's the idea that they can work tired and a little bit breathless, because we get to routine runs and then we're knackered and we haven't actually practiced the cardio for routines. So I would recommend something like that, where the athlete is working the cardio so they can practice that technique when they are already tired. Got a question about connecting whips to a fall. I'm assuming then that this athlete has a round off flick fall. That's really important. In which case, then the problem is going to be the whip and how we deliver the whip, right? Whips are obviously different because they're an airborne skill, some sort of distant relative of the back handspring, but also with completely its own principles as well. For example, round off back handspring, you land with your feet in front. That is the same for a whip, but you could argue the angle could even be the angle could be even more acute. And then by the same token, when you do the whip, you've got to then land that skill by getting your feet behind you to set in position again for the fall. So things that you could be doing like that, make sure that you can nail your tuck, make sure you can nail your layout, but then also with your fall, don't snap at the fall. Remember, a fall is only pulled on the way down, not on the way up. If you're pulling your fall off the floor, then you're already losing some of your air time. And with the whip, if you don't get that right, you're going to lose height already because you've taken away your hands from the block. So you need to make sure that you're getting your feet through. And then when you finish the whip, you bring them down so that they're behind you a little bit. Bam, hit the floor nice and hard and set first. Start driving for the layout, and then we pull on the way down, right? If we're pulling on the way up, you are really giving yourself a lot of trouble. You're probably going to under rotate and you're going to find it really hard to complete the skill. So I hope that helps. The last one was mental blocks. I get this every time. So my May one particularly was quite detailed. In June, I think I kind of brushed over it, but I'm just going to say like my top 3 things really for mental blocks. First thing though, before I say those top 3 things, is actually check that you have a block. All right. And what I mean by that is if you don't have a skill, right? Say you're learning a round off flick tuck. Say you don't have that skill, right? But you can't throw it, right? You don't have a block. You're scared, okay? And that's okay, but you need to understand the difference, right? Having a block is literally freezing to the spot, and like a deer caught in headlights before get hit by a truck. That is a mental block. Being scared is wanting to have a go at something, right? But there's just you're worried. You're too worried about the consequences of what that might be. Okay, so and if you don't have the skill, then it's very difficult to have a block. Sorry. So having a block is when you've had a skill for a long time, you've performed it in multiple different contexts, arenas, gyms, practices, whatever, parks, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, you can't do it anymore. That's a block. Not having a skill, learning a skill is being scared. Okay, that's the difference. So top 3 things in terms of what to do if you do have a block. First of all, I am not a sports psychologist, all right, but these are just things that have worked for me in the past. Firstly, I would recommend Jeff Benson and his book, Walls Come Tumbling Down. It's about dealing with blocks, but from the perspective of a parent, an athlete, and a coach, and how they can all work together to come to resolutions that will help the athlete to progress. So I would definitely recommend that. Number 2, I would recommend that you switch it up. Okay, so maybe try a different training space, change your approach. One of the things that athletes do is they stand there for about 5 minutes before they do anything, and then they're like, okay, now I'm going to go do my round off back handspring. That does not help. That is sending the wrong messages to the rest of your body, right? Because then your body gets used to standing there for 5 minutes, like, oh, okay, I have to stand there for 5 minutes before I do my tuck. Right. So what you need to do, or what I would advise you do, and has worked with loads of athletes that I've tried this with, is they're not allowed to stand. Right. So if we're spotting on a mat, for example, they get on and they perform the skill and then they get off. They're not allowed to get on and wait. If they get on and wait, I get them off again. So that was really useful, because then there was less thinking time, and it was just muscle memory kicking in, which is what we're trying to achieve here. The muscle memory overriding the kind of the anxiety factor. The other thing that I've done with this is running. So I'll make an athlete do a lap, jump onto the mat, back handspring, or jump onto the mat, round off back handspring spot, whatever it is that it needs to be. But just to take away the anxiety time. And it's not a technical term, it's just what I've called it. But it's that anxiety time where the athlete has too much time to think about what the consequences are. Am I going to hurt myself? Are my parents going to be cross? Is my coach going to shout at me? All those types of things. Get rid of that, less thinking time. And I found that to be a really useful way to help athletes start broaching that next phase of overcoming the block. And the third one, it sounds so cliche, but my God, does it work? Just be kind to yourself. The more that you are chastising yourself and bullying yourself into I'm not good enough and all of that, you are giving yourself you're creating more trouble for yourself, because you're kind of falling into this pit of despair even more. You're increasing this block issue, increasing the anxiety. So I would definitely look at that as well. So in terms of that, switch it up, different training space, maybe try sprinting or just getting on the mat and going, no standing around, and then be kind to yourself. And number 3, now, I don't want to get all like therapy on you, but I want you to think about what the actual cause of this new anxiety or block is, right? Because it might not be that your coach is shouting at you. It might not be because you feel like you're letting your team down. It might be because there's something going on with your family life, or school's really tough at the moment, or you've fallen out with a friend. Like, all of those things can also be a contributing factor to your mental block. Okay, so that is something that you can be thinking about as well. All right. So I think that's all of the things that I was looking to cover this week. We've talked about back handsprings, we've talked about set and fatigue, we've talked about connecting whips, and we've talked about mental blocks. If you did find this useful, please make sure that you like and subscribe. If you watch the video back and you're like, oh, I have this question, please feel free to drop a comment, and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. And thank you for watching.